The following video will concern what people sometimes call creationists or evolutionists debate or argument. I want to point out the word falsifiable. Let's get this done. A falsifiable statement is a statement that has the ability to be disproven. That's the basis of the name for it. More importantly, it's a specific claim that you make where you're stuck with making that claim and then altering it when you find out that it's not perfect. This is a part and parcel kind of thing with science and with actually getting something done. If you're trying to get something done in the world, you should test whether or not you're doing it correctly. Now, debate should be based on individuals who have very different opinions discussing something, whether they acknowledge each other or not. And we, the people watching the debate, can judge who gave the best explanation. Now, that's a neat idea, except it's flawed because a person can decide to hack the system by making arguments or statements that are influential but have no meaning. Language is not perfect or pure. When making explanatory claims about phenomena, we're supposed to use mostly, if not only, evidence. It's not proof. Proof is a different word. Evidence comes in the form of observations that confirm or deny any specific prediction, outcome, etc. The explanatory model being tested is what we're testing. If you show up to a debate being willing to ask people, do you like beating your wife? You are not debating. You're trolling. I'm going to bring up the Gish Gallop. I think the guy's name was Dwayne Gish. I've actually forgotten his first name, but it was a guy named Gish. And his way of arguing any subject concerning theology, religion, whatever, was to basically sit there and fuck with people until they got angry. Now, one of the people he wanted to debate said, as long as you walk in with the permission for me to slug you every time you do something infuriating on purpose, by my judgment only. Why? Because you stated that you would do that to me. Because he opened his mouth in public and said something definitive. I will hit him if he says something that aggravates me, like God doesn't exist. Okay, well, if you defy the rules of logic or break any rule of debate, you have to hold still while I slug you, because you can dish it out, right? He went to that animal level, and then he invoked, oh, doesn't might make right? Trial by combat? Which is what he was invoking. He wasn't willing to be held to the standard he overtly stated he wanted to be held to. And it doesn't matter how many times a person who's dishonest, fork-tongued demon, loses, they'll just come back and keep doing it. The point to this is, and I'll explain it quickly, is that the person who's the most antagonistic and most asshole-like will refuse to acknowledge they've lost, unless they're literally screaming on the ground with their intestines being pulled out. Well, that's a horrible thing to say. I'm literally reading back what that person was told. It doesn't matter if Gish actually said it. The point is, that's the standard he wanted them held to. He was agreeing with it, or said it out loud. Prove me wrong by looking up everything Mr. Gish said and looking for every example to disprove what I said of him not doing it. Well, you just didn't look in the right place. That's called a non-falsifiable argument. Yes, I just did one. I can't prove he said any of those things. I can't prove that happened. But that also means if I deliberately said something that was a lie to you, which I just did, there's no way you confirm it didn't happen. See? And it's very, very extreme. Meanwhile, there are actually people who've made almost identical statements and said trial by combat and found out that your average liberal and an atheist person isn't necessarily a scrawny nitwit who can't fight. And then they immediately back down. And every one of you has seen somebody chicken shit out like that. Come on. The people who bluster the most are going to be the ones that back down. I will make all sorts of statements, but I'll run away as soon as my ass is going to get kicked because I don't know that they're just going to beat me in a fight or accept I submit, you win. Let's go on with the rest of it. Evidence shows that species do change, so some confuse micro and macroevolution to win an argument. Let's go on. Humans and or an environment and or other creatures can alter any species till they cannot successfully interbreed. This has happened to humans. This has happened to animals. Macroevolution is usually how it's labeled, but it doesn't matter. Well, that's a bold claim. No, as a matter of fact, it isn't, because I can say you have to disprove it. That's the same kind of argument you hear from religious people. If I make a statement, I don't have to prove it, you have to disprove it. Why am I using this example? Rabbits on two different continents that can't breed with each other. They're clearly rabbits, but they separated at one point. We even know how. Crossing a land bridge between Siberia and Canada. Getting separated into North and South America because they migrated and they're no longer able to breed with each other, or just being literally in North America versus being in Africa. There are also creatures that are like halfway to being a bunny. The pika, it's a cute little guy that lives in the hills and stuff. It's essentially a bunny weird shaped version. There's a lot of creatures that are very closely related to and even have the ability to be checked to see that they are like another creature, but they're not of the kind, according to a person who's trying to make an argument. Okay. But the problem is, this has happened within the lifespan of humanity. Humanity has made note of creatures that have changed over time by drawing them, by making paintings, by simply making note of this, and shown that they've changed enough that they can no longer just breed together. Well, I want them to be a kind, so I'm not going to admit there's evolution going on. Well, you don't have to. We don't care. Just like getting an antagonistic, sadistic jackass piece of shit to admit that they're wrong about something, which isn't required. No one needs your permission to say you're wrong. I don't need your permission to prove you wrong. And you don't need my permission to prove me wrong to other people. An environment favoring an already existing set of traits, or gradual accumulations of mutations causing these traits and or them causing adaptations. A population changes over generations. Eventually a new population is no longer able to breed with the original population. Now, within human beings, this has not happened, correct? You get an offshoot of the original older population as a new species. But this takes thousands of generations. Human beings, maybe Neanderthals and humans couldn't inbreed now, but back in the past we could. Let's move on. You don't get a totally different new sort of creature. We are seeing branching and evolution and shifts and changes over a long, long period of time. Not a species also moving up a hierarchical ladder of, pawn to king or anything like that either. What you're seeing is creatures adapting to the environment. Scientists are not saying dogs morph into cats, or monkeys turn into humans, or snakes turn into birds. But birds evolved from a creature, bird-like creature, a long time ago that didn't have feathers. Snakes, at one time, there's a couple of varieties that have legs. They came from a creature that did have legs. And there's another variety of snake that came from something that didn't have legs. But we call them snakes. They're of a kind, except they can't breed with each other and they have a different origin. Monkey to human is not what happened. Humans and monkeys coming from the same kind of critter a long time ago? Yeah. We're a group. We're primates. That's a kind of a kind, but we can't breed with each other. But I can give blood to a monkey that needs to survive our surgical procedure. There's a kid that had a baboon heart for a little while. There is some level of compatibility and some level of connection, physiologically, genetically, etc. Depending on how far you want to push your definitions, we can have arguments all day. But fundamentalist, evangelical, young earth, creationist, fixity of species believers, I call them soul hunters, demand proof and evidence work only in the way that they can win an argument, and will only couch a statement in such a way that they can win because they create sort of a parable or a conundrum, a statement that can't actually work within itself. The origin of life is evolution. But the person also says, human life? Now, I don't know if I'm going to be judging you badly, but we're going to do the judgy thing for a minute. I'm assuming you don't like the idea that humans suffer the same as animals. that we are subjected to the same things, because we're not. Human beings create an environment where we can almost totally control our environment. There is absolutely no reason for the guy up the street who's dying of hypothermia right now, near you, to die being without a place to live, except that the law makes it to where if he tries to build a shelter and survive, which human beings have been doing for millennia, he'll get punished. He's not allowed to make a shed or shack, grass hut, mud hut, or dig a hole in the side of a hill and make a little cave for himself to survive. He's not allowed to hunt. He's not allowed to fish. He's not allowed to eat. We are not subjected to the same situation as animals because we choose to do that to ourselves. We can create our own environment and our own pressures. In that way, you can say that we are different than the animals. But in every other way, including evolution, we are identical. There isn't any differences, except that we're able to influence other creatures' evolution. So the origin of life, human life, is evolution. You're deciding that they have to be different. You're part of the reason that man is dying. If you were truly nature-based and God-based, none of you would be having an argument with me on the net. You'd be going and finding every person who's freezing in the street who's homeless and letting them live in your shed or your basement and making the laws to where they can't be kicked out because you're giving them a place to live. Species definitely evolve, you say. No species has ever evolved into a different type of species. You're phrasing it. You're doing the sneaky behavior. You're speaking with forked tongue. You're doing the devil's work. Why would you do that? Again, we human beings have been the pressure that has caused evolution in animals. You remember that magic banana guy who showed everybody that the banana was created by God to be perfect to fit in a human hand or a monkey hand? And he held up a banana that had been artificially mutated and altered, including causing genetic errors in it, to turn it into the perfect food for human beings to have, exactly like he's describing. It's an engineered food. It's not genetically engineered. It was done the hard way, through selective breeding. Cows are not supposed to have udders bigger than your freaking head. That's not real. That's not how it works. Those are heavily modified animals. So religious people are incredibly good at picking, first of all, not reading the Bible but misquoting it, and are very, very good at looking for examples where human beings have manipulated evolution and saying it's God's work. Screaming at the top of their lungs, but trying to keep it quiet, that they think of themselves as gods. Species have evolved into different types of species from natural pressures. Trust me, you did. You're bald from the neck down, except for a beard and mustache. I'm bald on the top of the head. I'm pale. On a planet with ultraviolet light, we would die if exposed to the elements without our brains to help us. Other animals do the same thing, but they live in caves. We're like Morlocks almost. How can it be explained? Well, if you're going to present a question on purpose that can't be answered because you're trying to make sure I can't answer it by saying type and kind and species maybe under your breath, while implying that humans have to be completely different than animals, I don't believe you want me to explain it, but maybe you do. So I posted all the information I gave in the top of this video in the description to you. You can do what you will with it. I do not require your permission to point out that you seem to be couching these statements. Now I'm going to say this. I don't know that you're doing this to be a jerk or not. Doesn't matter. Decades of religious people playing mind and word games like this is aggravating and unacceptable. Please don't do that anymore. Please stop reading Answers in Genesis if you ever have, and read Answers to Genesis, where someone actually sits there and points out every single thing I did. And don't argue with anybody. Don't even say it out loud. Just read it and learn. Stop trying to prop up your beliefs by yelling at me, maybe. But then again, maybe this person is innocently just repeating something they saw or heard on the net. Yes, species have changed to other species. That doesn't mean a dog turned into a cat. That just means you get bunnies and jackrabbits. And pikas. Look up pikas. They're cute. They're little guys. They're very closely related, apparently. And look up the capybara because they're awesome. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good